And tonight, my exclusive interview with the former Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. You will hear his thoughts on the Afghanistan troop surge, the KSM terror trial, and much more. And as usual, Vice President Cheney spoke very candidly about Barack Obama and his performance as Commander-in-Chief. Let's take a look. Mr. Vice President, good to see you. Welcome back.
It's good to be back, Sean.
Enjoying vacation?
I am. It's getting more hunting and fishing done these days than was true before, but I'm also working on a book, spending time with the family.
Is it going to be a tell-all, name names kind of book, or?
It's more a matter of covering the 41 years I spent in Washington. I went down to stay 12 months in 1968.
It went a little longer than you thought.
And but there's some fascinating stories and interesting things I was involved in. It's not sort of the definitive history of the era, but what it is a history of what I saw and what I did during that 41-year period of time, from the beginning of the Nixon administration up until last January.
You gave a recent interview to the Politico, and you said about Barack Obama, he is projecting weakness to America's enemies. Mm-hmm. Expand on that.
Well, I think most of us believe, and most presidents believe, and talk about the truly exceptional nature of America. Our history, where we come from, our belief in our constitutional values and principles, our advocacy for freedom and democracy, the fact that we've provided it for millions of people all over the globe and done so unselfishly. There's never been a nation like the United States of America in world history. And yet, when you have a president who goes around and bows to his host and then proceeds to apologize profusely for the United States, I find that deeply disturbing. That says to me this is a guy who doesn't fully understand or share that view of American exceptionalism that I think most of us believe in.
You talked before his address to the nation last week about him dithering on a decision in Afghanistan. You also used in another interview the term agonizing over the decision, and you says it has consequences for the forces in the field.
Well, it does. This is a situation in Afghanistan where he made a decision last March based in part on some things we provided him at the end of the Bush administration. Then he came around and appointed General McChrystal to implement it. Then in August he defended it and said he'd give them whatever they needed before the VFW. And then he came around this fall and couldn't decide on McChrystal's request and had 9 separate meetings of the National Security Council to finally come to a conclusion. Now, admittedly, these are important decisions. I don't want to downplay the significance of it at all, and any president's going to weigh very heavily those kinds of decisions that put American lives at risk. But the fact that he spent so much time agonizing over it is the way I would think about it. Everybody's watching. The Taliban are watching. The Al-Qaeda are watching. The Afghans who are on our side are watching. And when they see hesitation, uncertainty, lack of clarity from an American president, they begin to think the Americans aren't going to be here very long. They begin to think that the Americans are going to bail out sooner or later. And when that happens, they'll be left behind with the forces of the Taliban, for example. So then you see governments in that part of the world start to shift their alliances and their friendships. For example, just in the last 2 weeks, the Prime Minister of Kuwait's gone to Iran on an official visit. First time in 30 years. Why did he do that? Well, he wants to make sure he's got a foot in all camps. And they worry about declining U.S. influence, and when the U.S. is uncertain and hesitant, the conclusion they draw from that is that the United States is not going to be there for the long term.
So he was asked, the request came from General McChrystal, who he appointed,
right,
for 40,000 troops. Takes months to make a decision. You were critical at the time it was taking too long.
Right.
And then he only gives 3/4 of what General McChrystal was asking for, 30 of the 40,000 troops. And then he definitively says, after 18 months, our troops will begin to come home. How do you interpret that?
Well, it adds to the damage, in my mind. That is to say, the troop levels, that commitment I think is fine. That's what we ought to be doing. I think General McChrystal's a superb officer. He's been asked to head up the effort, and I certainly would have great confidence in his recommendations. But it also says to our adversaries out there that if you just wait long enough, the Americans will leave. And what worked so well in Iraq when we did the surge there was when the president went against all the public advice he was getting and all of the conventional wisdom and said, no, we're going to put surge, we're going to do it as long as we need to do it, we're going to win in Iraq. That changed the whole landscape out there in terms of how people were willing to line up. And we had a lot of folks previously involved in the insurgency who became friendly to the government.
Well, you had suggested in one interview that this might be about politics. Mm-hmm. You know, he didn't really make a lot of executive decisions before he became president. Voted present a lot. Is this one of these moments where he's trying to thread the needle, vote present, appeal all sides of, the political debate, or did he make the right decision? Some people said, well, Hannity, you're a conservative, give him credit. How do you view the ultimate decision that he made with the 18-month withdrawal date?
Well, it's better than withdrawal now, is the way I would put it. Putting extra troops in, I think, taking it that far is a plus. But this notion of uncertainty, the difficult time he has putting it together, all of this feeds into sort of the basic al-Qaeda strategy. Remember the way al-Qaeda operates and what their underlying plan is if you kill enough Americans, you can change American policy. And they've done it. They did it in Mogadishu in '93, in the World Trade Center in '93, kind of thing. They can terrorize us enough so that what you get out of that is a change in U.S. policy. And when they see him announce in advance that there's going to be a withdrawal 18 months down the road, they come to the point where they feel like their strategy, their worldview has been validated. And in the meantime, your task of trying to control the situation, trying to put down the Taliban and so forth, has simply gotten harder because you were weak and indecisive when you made the decision to do it. And then at the end of the day, you set this date when you're going to begin withdrawal, and that's not an impressive way to deal with the threat that the Taliban represents. So
you're saying, and if we have an exit date, an exit strategy announced at the time of the troop surge, we're not going to get the support that we would need to ultimately be as successful in Iraq? Fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. It's harder to get what you need. I would like to see them also talk about victory, talk about winning. That the test for when you've accomplished your mission is when you've stabilized Iran, or Iraq in this case, you've got a government established that's capable of controlling their sovereign territory, you've trained and equipped Afghan forces to be able to deal with all of that.
And coming up, more of my exclusive interview with former Vice President Dick Cheney. So what does he think about the Obama administration's decision to try Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in a New York City courtroom? That answer and much more.